You're about to hear the version of ancient Egypt they never carved into stone. Because the worst thing done to Pharaoh's daughters wasn't done by enemies, it was done by the people in white linen. Picture this, a 14-year-old princess walking through Karnak after dark. Not toward the grand halls tourists photograph.
Past those. Past the torchlit courtyards.
Past the places her father knows exist. And the deeper she goes, the quieter it gets.
No crowds.
No music.
No witnesses.
Just limestone corridors tightening like a fist. Everyone keeps telling her this is an honor. That she's about to become God's wife of Ammonius. A title so holy it can stabilize a kingdom. So why is she shaking like she's walking toward an execution? Because tonight isn't the ceremony people will cheer for tomorrow. Tonight is the part that never gets written down. The part Pharaoh himself is forbidden to see. And when she reaches the unmarked door, plain stone no gold, she realizes something terrifying.
This isn't a temple anymore. It's a machine. A key turns. The door opens.
Inside, a small circular chamber, walls covered in instructions. A basin at the center filled with dark liquid that isn't water. And in the shadows, 4 high priests, silent, waiting. She's told gently, like it's routine.
Remove your garments. Step in.
The purification must be complete. And that's when the truth hits her. The public story and the private reality are about to split forever. Because what happens next will be called sacred. It will be recorded as divine union. And if she ever tries to describe it in human words, she'll be accused of blasphemy. But here's the part that makes it worse. 3 chambers away sits another woman, older, powerful, titled, and trapped. She survived the same night years ago.
She could stop it. She doesn't move.
And the reason she doesn't is the real secret of how the Ammonius priesthood controlled Pharaoh's bloodline. They want you to believe the priests were just religious men. But what if Karnak wasn't just a temple? What if it was a government inside a government? Because that older woman sitting 3 chambers away?
She isn't a servant.
She's the current god's wife of Ammonius. A figure so powerful her signature can move land, gold, and armies of workers. So why does a woman with that kind of authority sit frozen, listening? Because her authority is real on papyrus, and fake in the places that matter. Here's the mechanism. The priesthood doesn't need to chain a princess. They build a world where her freedom is a performance and every exit is a sin. Pharaoh is told, these rites are too sacred for your eyes. If he pushes back, he becomes the man who disrespects Ammonius. The man who risks drought, rebellion, invasion, because he questioned the temple.
So he signs. He agrees.
He sends his daughter into Karnak like an offering with a heartbeat.
And the priests?
They don't call it taking a hostage. They call it stability.
Now zoom out.
Ammonius' temple isn't just prayers and incense.
It's land. It's cattle. It's workshops. It's boats.
It's tens of thousands of workers who eat because the priests say so. When the priesthood controls that much, they don't ask Pharaoh for respect. They negotiate with him like an equal. And in unstable times, foreign threats, divided dynasties, coups, Pharaoh needs the priests to publicly declare, the gods approve this ruler. That declaration is priceless.
So the priesthood sets the price. A royal daughter. Young. Unmarried. Removed from politics.
Installed in the temple under their supervision. They even dress it up as a miracle. Your daughter will be the divine bride. She will speak for Ammonius. But notice what quietly disappears the moment she takes the title.
She can't marry. She can't have children.
She can't produce heirs who might strengthen her father's line. And the most brilliant part of the trap?
Adoption.
The current god's wife must adopt the next one, legally binding the girl to the temple chain, not to her birth family.
It's not succession. It's extraction.
A river of royal daughters flowing into Karnak, and never flowing back out. Back in that circular chamber, the princess is staring at the basin. Her skin already prickling from the bitter fumes. The priests haven't touched her yet. They don't need to. Because the real weapon isn't force. It's sacred language. And the moment she steps into that liquid, her old life dies in a way no funeral could ever match. The basin isn't there to clean her. It's there to erase her. The liquid stings the moment it reaches her skin. Sharp, chemical, wrong.
Not warm bathwater. Not purification.
Something meant to burn the body just enough that the mind starts begging for escape. But escape is not an option in a room where every door is theology. The priests begin chanting in a language older than her childhood. Words she only half understands, Death, rebirth, vessel, surrender. And as the sound fills the chamber, her brain does something terrifyingly human. It tries to make this make sense. Because if this is holy, then her fear is weakness. If this is honor, then her panic is shameful. And that's how the trap closes from the inside. Then the razor appears.
A priest steps forward, calm as a clerk.
Copper blade catching lamplight. He doesn't look angry.
He doesn't look excited. He looks practiced.
Hair falls in soft, silent clumps. In Egypt, hair is identity. Style marks status. But in this chamber, shaving isn't symbolism. It's branding. A shaved head makes her instantly recognizable.
No disguise.
No blending into a crowd. No running away without every eye turning. When it's done, the priestesses pour more of the solution over her scalp. It runs down her face and into her eyes. The burn forces a gasp she tries to swallow. And that's the first lesson. You will suffer quietly. You will not make the temple look ugly. A mark is made on a papyrus. Not she endured. Not she was terrified. Just something clinical.
A check. A pass.
Then they dress her again, but not in royal finery.
Simple white linen. Uniform linen.
It hits her harder than the burn. This is not a coronation.
It's an assignment.
They lead her into the next room. This chamber is larger, and worse. Because the walls are covered in scenes of Ammonius, fertility, power, domination, painted so openly that her stomach turns. In public spaces, these images are myth. In here, with no audience, they feel like instructions. And at the center is a stone platform. The high priest steps out of shadow, leopard skin, painted face, the authority of a nation in his voice.
He doesn't introduce himself.
He doesn't need to. He says, "You are no longer Pharaoh's daughter." And with one sentence, he cuts the last rope connecting her to her father, her name, her childhood.
Lie down, he tells her. Not as a request.
As a requirement for the kingdom. Her mind tries to bargain. If I refuse, will my father come? If I scream, will anyone believe me?
If I obey, will it end? Then she looks at the door.
The priestesses stand there, not holding weapons, not restraining her, just blocking the idea of outside. Like the temple itself has grown arms. And finally she understands the true horror. Tomorrow, she will stand in sunlight before thousands.
She will smile.
She will be called blessed. But whatever happens in this room tonight, will never be spoken in plain words. Because the moment she calls it what it is, she becomes the criminal for insulting the gods. The high priest repeats, softer this time, almost kindly.
Lie down.
The god is waiting. And she moves toward the platform. Right as a sound leaks through the stone, faint, distant, unmistakable. A woman's muffled sob from somewhere deeper in the temple.
Not her. Someone else.
Which means this isn't a one-time nightmare.
It's a system.
That sob changes everything. Because it proves the chamber isn't an exception.
It's a pipeline.
And the princess, Shepenwepet, realizes something even worse than fear. Somebody before her tried to survive this. Somebody after her will be sent here too. The priests keep chanting, but now the chant sounds like cover. A curtain of sound so no one outside can tell what kind of ritual is happening inside. The high priest lifts his hands, and the room obeys him like a body obeys a brain.
Priestesses move.
Lamps are adjusted. The air thickens with incense. Everything is controlled. And Shepenwepet is given one last illusion of choice. They never say, "If you refuse, we'll hurt you." They say, "If you refuse, you will endanger Egypt." That's the trick. They tie her body to the country. They tie her consent to her father's throne. They tie her suffering to the Nile's flood. So when she freezes, shaking, they don't rush her.
They wait.
Like they've learned that silence is stronger than force. In the next chamber, the older god's wife, Ammonius' divine bride, sits alone, hands clenched so tight her nails bite skin. She can hear enough to know. She can't hear enough to pretend she doesn't. And here's the poison. She remembers the one time she tried to intervene. The warning she gave a younger girl. The punishment that followed, 3 days of purification. A ritual that left her unable to walk. That's how the temple trains empathy out of people. Not by telling you to be cruel. By proving kindness is expensive.
So she sits still.
Because she learned what the priesthood wants every woman in this system to learn. You can survive, or you can resist. You don't get to do both. Back with Shepenwepet, the priestesses begin removing her new linen again, calmly, efficiently. No anger.
No hesitation. Just procedure.
And the most terrifying part is how normal it feels to them. One priest lifts a small jar and smears an oil across her skin. It smells like myrrh and something medicinal, sharp enough to make her eyes water.
Protection, they'll call it.
Preparation, they'll call it. But what it really is the temple ensuring the ritual leaves fewer visible marks. Because tomorrow morning, Pharaoh will look at his daughter and need to see a miracle.
Not a crime. The high priest steps closer.
He speaks softly, like he's comforting her.
Do not fear.
This is sacred union.
You will be reborn. Reborn as what? She wants to scream. A bride? A symbol? A hostage?
But she can't ask the question out loud, because asking is already doubt, and doubt is already sin. Then something happens that's almost crueler than what's coming. He places a hand on her forehead like a blessing.
A father's gesture. A priest's touch. A god's permission.
And in that instant, her brain does a desperate thing. It tries to detach. It tries to float above the room, above the stone, above the chanting, anywhere that isn't here. Because she can feel the next step arriving like thunder. And the last thing she sees before she shuts down inside herself is the high priest nodding to the others. Not like a man beginning a prayer. Like a man starting a process. What happens next is why the records stay clean. Because the temple doesn't need to write down the ugly part. It only needs to write down the title.
Purified. Consecrated.
United with Ammonius. 3 words that can hide a lifetime. By sunrise, Shepenwepet is upright again, dressed in gold, face painted flawless, eyes too still. They don't just prepare her body for the public.
They prepare the crowd.
Outside, the courtyard is already filling. 10,000 people bringing offerings, chanting, crying with pride. They're not here to witness a girl being taken from her own life. They're here to witness a story they've been trained to love.
And Pharaoh?
He's seated like a mountain, crown, beard, power. But there's a problem no crown can solve. He's been told he can't enter the private rite. A father is barred from his daughter's final preparations. If he insists, he's not just disobeying priests. He's disrespecting Ammonius. And if Ammonius is insulted, the priests can whisper one sentence that ruins everything. The god has withdrawn favor. That sentence can ignite rebellions, collapse alliances, invite rivals to move in. So Pharaoh stays seated.
And he calls it faith.
Now Shepenwepet walks out into the light. People cheer at the sight of her shaved head, because they've been taught it means purity. They cheer at the white linen, because they've been taught it means devotion. They cheer at her jewelry, because they've been taught it means blessing. And Shepenwepet realizes the true genius of the machine. This is not just something being done to her. It is something the entire nation is helping to protect. Because if she screams, the crowd won't hear help. They'll hear sacrilege. And then, right as she reaches the place beside her father, she sees it. A woman being quietly pulled away at the edge of the courtyard. Not for stealing. Not for attacking. For saying a single sentence too loudly. A sentence that sounded like a question. And Shepenwepet understands. This isn't only a ritual. It's a censorship system. A system that doesn't just punish you for resisting. It punishes you for naming what's happening. And now it's her turn to speak, publicly, into the silence. To tell everyone she chose this. Her father looks at her, waiting for the words that will secure his rule. But Shepenwepet's mouth is dry, and the script in her head feels like a lie that could kill her twice. If she says the words, the nation applauds. If she doesn't, the nation panics. That's the leverage. So Shepenwepet speaks, steady voice, perfect cadence, like she's reading from stone that was carved inside her. I am honored. I am devoted. I renounce earthly life. Each sentence lands like a lock clicking shut. And the crowd erupts, relieved. Because they didn't come to watch a girl get trapped. They came to watch Egypt stay stable. Her father smiles, just enough to convince himself he did the right thing. But when their eyes meet, his gaze flickers away.
A tiny betrayal.
Not because he knows details, but because he senses there are details. The priests glide in, blessing her, praising her, sealing the story.
Then the feast begins.
This is the part nobody questions. Music, bread, wine, officials congratulating her like she just won a crown. But Shepenwepet can barely swallow. Not from sacred awe.
From shock.
Every time she shifts in her seat, pain reminds her the temple didn't just give her a title. It took ownership. And then, quietly, comes the next step in control.
They don't threaten her in public. They reward her.
A lavish wing of rooms.
Servants. Perfumes. Jewelry.
The illusion of privilege. Because if you can convince a prisoner she's lucky, she'll police herself. That night, the doors to her quarters close.
Not slammed.
Not barred with iron.
Just closed.
And she notices the architecture. A courtyard with one entrance. A hallway with turns designed to slow movement. Windows high enough for air, too high to see the street.
It's beautiful.
And it's perfect for watching someone. She learns that quickly. A servant kneels nearby, writing on papyrus. Shepenwepet steps closer and catches a glimpse.
It's a report. What she ate. What she said. When she hesitated.
How long she stared at the door. Her private life is being inventoried like grain. She looks up sharply, and the servant's face goes pale.
Not guilty. Not defiant. Terrified.
Because the servant isn't her ally. The servant is also trapped, just lower in the machine. 2 days later, that servant is gone.
Reassigned.
Replaced by someone with eyes like a sealed jar. Now Shepenwepet understands the rule. You can have anything, gold, land, titles. But you can't have a person.
Not a friend. Not a confidant.
Not a single human being who belongs to you more than they belong to the temple. And that's when the older god's wife finally appears. She enters like a queen.
Perfumed. Composed. Untouchable.
She studies Shepenwepet the way you study a mirror you don't want to look into. Then she says the line that sounds like comfort, until you hear what's underneath. You will learn how to live here.
Not escape. Not fight. Just live.
And as she turns to leave, Shepenwepet sees something on the older woman's wrist. A bruise, half hidden beneath gold. Old enough to be fading.
New enough to be real.
Meaning whatever happens in the dark chambers didn't end after the first night.
It repeats. On a schedule.
The bruise is the first honest thing Shepenwepet has seen since she entered Karnak. Because it proves the initiation wasn't a doorway.
It was a leash.
And now she starts noticing patterns. Certain days, the servants behave differently.
They speak less. They avoid her eyes.
They lay out oils and linens without being asked, like they're preparing a room for weather. Then a priest arrives with a calm face and a small complaint. A mispronounced word in a dawn prayer. A gesture a finger width off. A pause that lasted one breath too long. To anyone else, it's nothing. But in this temple, nothing is the excuse that becomes permission. Divine displeasure, the priest says. Renewed consecration, he says. Correction, he says. And Shepenwepet learns the most maddening rule of all. There is no way to be perfect enough to be left alone. If she performs flawlessly, it means she is ready for deeper service. If she makes a mistake, it means she requires more correction. Either way, the answer is the same. So she tries something desperate, something quiet.
She hints. Not in accusations.
Not in words that could be repeated as blasphemy.
In tone.
In the way she answers visitors approved by the priests. In the way she describes exhaustion and overwhelming duties. In the way she lets a sentence hang unfinished, hoping someone will hear what she can't say. A royal official visits from her father's court. A man who once taught her to read. She wants to grab him, to whisper, to beg. But guards stand in the courtyard. Servants sit close enough to count syllables. So she says carefully, the sacred responsibilities are intense. He nods kindly.
Of course.
Such honor requires strength. He hears what the temple trained him to hear.
Not danger. Devotion.
After he leaves, the high priest summons her. His voice is soft, like a blanket over a blade. You spoke of difficulty, he says. You understand how that sounds to ordinary minds. Shepenwepet keeps her face smooth. I meant only that I wish to serve correctly.
He steps closer.
The god's wife does not plant doubt, he says.
Doubt spreads.
Doubt creates questions. Questions create disorder. Then he delivers the threat without ever using the word threat. Your father's legitimacy rests on this office. Your comfort is not the priority.
Egypt is.
And now the trap snaps into its cruelest shape. If she speaks, she won't just be punished. She'll be blamed for any chaos that follows.
So she stops hinting.
She becomes perfect on the surface. And the temple rewards that perfection with a darker gift. Less supervision in daylight.
More access at night.
Because when you stop resisting publicly, the machine doesn't relax. It just moves you to a quieter room. Then a young servant makes a mistake. A girl, barely older than Shepenwepet was, wanders the wrong corridor and hears something she shouldn't. She tells a friend, trembling, something is wrong. Within hours, both are taken.
Not executed. Not publicly beaten.
Something worse for a system that survives on silence.
They're made to recant. Loudly. Formally. In front of witnesses. Misunderstanding. Confusion. False rumor.
The words are forced into their mouths like stones. And when the girls return, their eyes look emptied out. Not because they learned the truth, but because they learned what happens to anyone who tries to touch the truth. That night, Shepenwepet sits alone in her gold-filled room, realizing the final horror. The temple doesn't just control the princess. It controls the language people would need to save her. Once the temple controls the language, it controls reality. Because how do you accuse a holy rite without sounding insane? How do you describe something forbidden to describe, without becoming the criminal? That's why the system doesn't rely on chains. It relies on vocabulary. And now that Shepenwepet has stopped hinting, stopped testing, stopped reaching for rescue, the temple advances to the next phase.
Routine.
Her days become a loop so tight it starts erasing time.
Wake before dawn. Wash in blessed water. White linen. Gold. Incense. The same corridor. The same shrine.
The same gestures. And the people watching her, the priests, the scribes, don't look at her like a person. They look at her like a function that must not fail. If she falters, they don't ask, "Are you okay?" They ask, "What must be done to restore order?" So Shepenwepet adapts the only way a trapped mind can adapt.
She splits herself.
One part of her performs perfectly. Smiles at the right moment. Speaks with measured calm. Moves with ceremonial grace. The other part goes somewhere else.
Somewhere safe.
Somewhere no priest can enter. That's why her eyes start looking holy to outsiders.
Still. Distant. Untouchable.
They call it devotion. It's survival. Years pass like this, and then comes the instruction that feels like a death sentence delivered as an honor. You will adopt your successor. A new pharaoh has risen.
A new daughter will be sent.
A girl barely 12, arriving with wide eyes and a heart full of stories about what she's about to become. And for the first time in years, something breaks through Shepenwepet's numbness. Rage. Not loud rage. Not useful rage. The kind that burns silently because there's nowhere to put it. The girl is brought to her for supervised meetings. They sit in gardens with guards in the distance, servants close enough to hear breaths. The child talks like a child. She asks innocent questions. Is it beautiful? Do you really speak to Ammonius? Are you happy? And every question slices. Because Shepenwepet realizes the most brutal design feature of the entire institution. It forces victims to become the welcoming committee. If Shepenwepet warns her openly, she will be punished and the girl will be isolated anyway. If she says nothing, she becomes complicit. So she tries a third option, coded truth. The role is difficult, she says carefully. You must be strong. You must obey. You must endure. The girl laughs nervously. But it's sacred, right? Shepenwepet pauses half a beat too long. And that pause gets reported. That evening, the high priest summons her again. You are planting shadows, he says. Shepenwepet lowers her eyes. I am preparing her. The high priest's voice is gentle, almost fatherly. Prepare her to be devoted, he corrects. Not to be afraid. Then he adds the sentence that turns Shepenwepet's stomach cold. She will become what you are, because you will help make her. And suddenly Shepenwepet understands the deeper reason the older god's wife never intervened. It wasn't only fear. It was indoctrination through complicity. Because once you've been forced to play a role in the next girl's downfall, a part of you stops believing you deserve freedom. And the night the new girl is taken underground, Shepenwepet is ordered to be present. Not as a savior. As a witness. As a seal of continuity. And as the door closes behind them, the child turns and looks at Shepenwepet with pure trust. The kind of trust that makes betrayal feel like murder.